second time today, this morning. Seeing as how I've got a little bit of time, I thought that I would also jump on the platform and go live on the channel to talk about a video which I posted, I think it was yesterday, and it's about choice and choices. Now, the first thing I suppose to bear in mind when I talk about choice and choices is that I believe that we have at least an element of free will. I believe that we can choose certain things. Now, there's a big argument against that, which I'm aware of. And the argument against free will is that because so many of the things that we do are made up of habits and reflex, and one could argue instinct, and also those things that are driving us, which can be how we interpret certain situations. So, for example, our frames of reference, paradigms, filters, literally lenses, the lenses that we look at the planet through, because they're so ingrained, then when we get into a particular situation, when we're in a moment, then most of that isn't really anything to do with conscious thought. And I think a lot of the time that's true. But we do know that we can step back and observe our thinking or think about what we're thinking. We do that in some forms of meditation. And then you may say, well, okay, hold on a second. In that case, who's doing the observing? And that's a very, very good question. Some people call it the observing self. It's the ability to, when we do things unconsciously, when we do things by habit, when we do things by reflex, it's often described by some as that little voice in your head that says, what are you doing? Oh, keep quiet, shut up now, step back, step away, don't do that. Now's a good time to do something differently. Can you see how you might be coming across in this moment? If you've ever had those experiences at all, you'll know what I'm talking about. It is subjective, I appreciate, and I've certainly had those experiences. And when I have those experiences, I'm reminded that there's something else going on. And so, yeah, I believe that a lot of what we do can be down to habit, of course. And we do things without thinking about it. How many times do people pick up a mobile phone, for example? It's in their hand, they're not really thinking about it. And you know, yes, me as well, of course. And I see people do it and say, well, what are you doing? You know, we need to focus on this. Could you put the phone down, please, for a moment? And they go, yeah, sure. And then they pick it back up again. So there's a lot of that going on. But I also believe that at least within certain moments and situations, we can be more aware. We can be more conscious of what we're doing, more in the moment, more present. And that's kind of the premise of what I was saying about choices in that video about choices. Because when you then think about life as being a little bit like a play or a movie, but probably a play is in some ways a better analogy, because if you've ever been involved in the Amateur Dramatic Society or put on a play at school or a musical, most of us have. And in fact, almost all of us, particularly when we were younger, have set up games where we say, right, okay, you pretend to be so-and-so, you pretend to do that. When I say this, you do that. So play, acting, performative approaches to social interaction are things which I believe for many of us are kind of inbuilt. And so it's likely you've had those experiences. And when you've had those experiences, you'll be aware that when you do things that is a little that are different or can be different to what was expected, then there's a different outcome. And again, I come back to the Amateur Dramatic Society. Now, full disclosure, I've never been in the Amateur Dramatic Society, so maybe I'm wrong, but I've watched plays and I've seen videos of things when they've gone wrong, and I've been in school plays, so I've done that. And when that happens, then what you can see and what you can find is that somebody, when they do something unexpectedly or different from what was rehearsed, causes a ripple effect, because it means that the timing is thrown out. And sometimes the whole thing falls to bits because people start laughing or they get annoyed, and they've got to say, okay, stop, let's do that again. That didn't work. And that's harder in front of a live audience, of course. Generally, they'll just keep on going. But it has an impact. And that got me thinking then about life, in the sense that, as Shakespeare wrote, all the world's a stage. And, you know, we're people playing a part. Very often in our daily routines, we are the main characters. And as the main character, when we meander about and have our interactions, then of course we have an impact on people around us. How we interact with people, how we relate, what we say, how we behave, how we say it, when we say it, all has an impact. Good, bad, indifferent. And those moments of truth, those interactions, those light little collisions that we have, is a little bit like snooker, for example, where when we hit the ball and it collides with the other balls, then in Newtonian physics, there's an equal and an opposite reaction. And that's happening, in my opinion, when we interact with people. There's an output from how we interact. And those soft little collisions, as I'm calling them, I don't mean that sound bad, it can be a very good thing, but that interaction of energy, we walk away feeling one way or another, and people walk away feeling one way or another. And we have the opportunity in those moments to do some good or do some not so good. We have the opportunity to be neutral, of course, and also we have the opportunity to, often by habit and often because of emotional dysregulation and our inability to manage what we're doing and saying in those moments, to create a bit of chaos, perhaps to cause some strife, perhaps to have a go at people, perhaps to tear a strip off them, perhaps to make them feel bad. And we don't necessarily go out to do that. Sometimes we do because we're in a bad mood and we conclude that this individual or these individuals are the enemy, and so they need to be brought down a peg or two. It would be disingenuous of me to suggest that that doesn't happen and that I'd never done it, and you probably have done it, but it's not something that I do regularly. But this concept of choice absolutely fascinates me. And the idea that when we go out and we interact, all those interactions, think of how many you may have had today already. That could be on phone, it could be online, it could of course be in person, it could be family members, it could be connected to work. All those interactions, we have the capability, or there is the possibility, to do something different with them. Now, you may say, I'm absolutely perfect, I never make mistakes, I'm always bang on the money, everything that I do is perfect, and I always leave a situation and the people within that situation feeling at least neutral and as often as not better than when they arrived. I cannot make that claim. That is not necessarily true of me. For me, it's work in progress. For me, it's thinking, okay, how can I do a little bit better next time? What can I focus on? Self-reflection is really useful in these situations. Self-reflection in the sense that we can ask ourselves, okay, being truly honest with me, where can I improve? What do I have a tendency to do? It could be to overreact. It could be to talk too much. It could be not to listen. It could be to judge people. It could be to make assumptions that may be negative, and so on. And if those things are in the mix, for me, then those are the things that I might say to myself before I get into certain situations. How do I want to behave? What would the ideal version of me do in these situations? And beforehand, you can do a mental rehearsal, or you can just be aware of yourself in that moment. Now, you won't stay out there, you won't stay in the observing self, because you'll jump into what's happening. But there may be a moment when someone says something or something happens that is triggering or makes you unhappy or irritated or whatever. There can be a beat or two, and that's often all it takes to allow you, me, us to step back a little and say, okay, what would be a response to this rather than an emotional reaction? Now, a caveat to that is, if we are not in a good place ourselves, if we're strung out for whatever reason, then it is much harder to do anything that I've just said. If we haven't had enough sleep, if we are irritated and angry or down in the dumps because of things in our lives, whatever that may be, then we're more emotionally aroused in that moment. And even if we're down, feeling down in terms of low mood, that still means that we're kind of fired up emotionally. That may sound counterintuitive, but that's sort of what the neuroscience would suggest. And so when we're in those emotionally aroused states, it is far harder to be sanguine in the moment, to step back and say, hey, I'm going to do the right thing here. I'm going to be the bigger person. I'm going to put the compliment in. I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to lash out. I'm not going to strike back, or whatever it may be. It could be that what you're doing is just it's not a challenging situation. It could be that what's happening is you say, I want to go in and I want to do something which is very positive here. I want to actually put good into the conversation. It's not that it's bad. It's not that the relationship is fractious or anything, but you want to do some good in it, which may be to support someone. It may be to listen, just simply listen, to keep quiet and listen. That sometimes for a lot of us can be quite difficult because we want to give our opinion or jump in or say something in return. But stepping back and listening can work wonders, particularly in the area of helping someone out with their mental health or whatever it may be. So my contention is that when we go about our daily lives, sometimes, not all the time, I don't want to imply we're in the Truman Show, but sometimes it is useful to think about it as us being in a play. And just as I've suggested, if we say the right line in the right way at the right time for the right reason and all that sort of stuff, then what can happen is we can have an impact, a positive impact. We already are, no doubt, having positive impact. Sometimes it would be neutral and sometimes it might be negative. But then I want to throw something else into the mix. And what I would like to say is that, I'm sorry, I'm doing this because I'm covered in rain and stuff. What I want to throw into the mix is that in life, we want certain outcomes. We want to attain a goal or goals. And attaining those goals, that goal, then what it means is that we need to behave in certain ways. We should behave in a way that's congruent to us reaching that goal, having that experience, if that's what the goal is, and so on. So a lot of people talk about manifesting, and I'm not going to talk about that here. That's a big topic for a lot of people. They imagine how things will be, and somehow they find through an element of serendipity, perhaps, that certain things show up. And great. I mean, we can explain that in different ways. We can explain it, as some people do, energetically. We can explain it by the fact that the reticular activating system in the brain will give an importance to things that we've been paying attention to, and that seem to be tagged as emotionally significant. And so that part of the brain, via the thalamus, will make sure that that's brought to our attention. So we'll begin to see opportunities, that's for sure. And that doesn't have to require anything energetic, but I'm not saying that it doesn't. And if people have that process and it works for them, great. Each to their own, absolutely. What I'm saying here is that another way to reach our goals, to get the outcomes that we want, is to behave in alignment with someone who would have those goals. And then some people say, well, that's what some of the manifesting people say. Yeah, so again, great, fantastic. Different conversation. They're the experts in that area. And if it works, fantastic again. But consider a different way, a concrete way, perhaps a more concrete way, a more tangible way for all of us in the moment. And I'm not saying it's better, I'm just saying it's different. To achieve what we want is to act in the moment like we are the person who would have that thing that we want. So let's say, and I'm going to use a kind of probably a slightly daft example, but to make the point, let's say that what we want is to be someone who is the best friend of other people, and someone who is the rock, the steadfast one when things go wrong, to be the one who isn't likely to jump up and down and shout and scream and terrify other people. So we want to be calm. Let me just use that overview word. And again, that doesn't mean to say that it is a goal for you or it is a goal for me. Maybe you already are calm. It's just an example. So what we can do is to set the intention, to say to ourselves, when I'm out and about interacting and I meet people, and these situations are going to be random, I don't know where they're going to come from. So I can't really mentally rehearse an exact situation. But what I can begin to say to myself is, I intend to act like a person who would be calm, who would be the rock, who would be steadfast in any moments or every moment in my interactions today. And in the interactions which are calm and which are happy and which are carefree, then it's perhaps easier to do that. But when things get a little bit tense, when someone is a bit irritated or angry or fearful, and the situation is also a little bit like that, then we can say to ourselves, yeah, okay, who was I going to be at this point in time? That observing self. How would I behave? What would I say and do? How would I say it? When would I say it? At this point in time, in this situation, if I were the calm version of me. I hope that makes sense. And so then we say and do that thing. Now, once more, if this is like in the middle of a movie, I've got to be careful what I say on platforms. Of course, I don't want to trigger the bots, just for an example. But let's say an extremely dangerous situation, then that's very difficult for most of us to remain calm in those situations. Absolutely. But in life, in day-to-day life, most things that we might have been triggered by, the next day we've forgotten about them. To paraphrase a movie, they don't amount to a hill of beans. And so should we worry about it? Should we be triggered by it in that moment? So again, if the goal is to be that calm person, to be that steadfast friend, and the one who keeps perhaps a sort of level head in different situations, if that's who we want to be, then one way to do it is to act as if. We act as if we are that person, which brings us full circle to this idea of the play, to this idea of us being a main character in that play, to have an ability to consciously choose, that we have choice. And again, as I was saying earlier, I believe that we do have choice. We don't act as if we do a lot of the time because we're wandering about like automatons. We're on autopilot, so to speak. But we do have it. And when we switch off things, that habitual machine that we have inside us, the machine that will cause us to pick up the phone and look at it without realizing we're doing it, that I mentioned already, when we switch that off and say, I'm going to be more conscious right now, and I want to act as this best version of me, and acting as that best version of me means that in this moment, when the situation is beginning to unfold, I'm going to choose my line. I'm going to choose what I'm going to say. I'm going to choose to act in a way that is in alignment with that steadfast friend, that calm individual, as I'm using in the example. But it could be anything. So I hope that makes sense. I hope what you can glean there is that what I'm suggesting is that we have more choice in the moment than very often we remotely realize. And I'm also going to add in here that when we do things and choose to be who we want to be in that moment, it is important that that aligns with our values and beliefs. So I'm not suggesting here that what we can easily do, and I don't think it would be of benefit to us anyway, but what we can easily do is to pretend. I mean, we can do it, but it takes a lot of energy and it's pretty fake and it doesn't last long and it's probably not good for us. But we can pretend to be someone that we're not, that is not in alignment with our values. Now, that doesn't mean to say it is different from in the moment. deciding not to get irritated. And yeah, I believe we can do that if we haven't been subsumed by the irritation. I believe that we can rise above some of those emotions before they overpower us. So we can decide not to be irritated. But if our value is that there is great value in being irritated all the time, and being angry all the time, and being combative all the time, and being someone who strikes out and lashes out and just is bad tempered with everyone around them. If we believe that that has great value, and if we believe that that is something that is important and is the only thing that will get us through in life, then it's very difficult to act in a different way. And that will cause us to perhaps have a sense of cognitive dissonance. The value of, I want to act differently here, with the inherent value and belief set that no, we shouldn't do that. That's a different set of tools that is required. That's deeper work on self, really looking at beliefs and looking at values and considering how much good and or harm will we have done when we look back and do a life review. So that's a different thing. I'm suggesting here that to choose in the moment to be the best version of ourselves requires us to be able to access, or to be in alignment with, at least part of our value and belief set, if that makes sense. So somewhere within us, for us to be the calm person in that example, we have to value calmness. We have to believe that it is good to be calm. We have to believe that it is beneficial for people around us if we are calm, if that makes sense. So in other words, I come back to summarize, it should be in alignment with at least some of our beliefs and some of our value sets and our hierarchy of values. So that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm saying that, in summary, the world is a stage in many ways, and we have these interactions, and we have more choice than we realize. Does that mean we can choose all the time? Absolutely not. Is it a gradual process where over time, if we stack up doing the right thing more often, whatever the right thing may mean to you, and in that moment, will we see some results ultimately? Yes, I believe that we will, and we'll probably feel better for it anyway. And it's also good for us to really consider how we're behaving, to look at ourselves as if we were a little camera over here looking at us in this play. Do you want to behave like that? Do you see how you're coming across? Could you change it? And it is easier, having said that, to catch ourselves before we go into a situation and say, okay, what would the best version of me do right now? But we can certainly sometimes stop ourselves in the moment. I'm sure you've done it. I've certainly done it. Not all the time, but there's times when I've thought, I want to say this. No, I'm not going to say it because this is going to damage this individual. This is just petty. This isn't right. And because I'm aligned with my value set, which is, at least in part, to value doing the right thing, to do good, and to believe that it is important to do good, then I'm not scrunching something up. I'm not saying, I really want to have a go at this individual, but I won't. However, I value having a go, and I believe it's important to have a go. So that level of internal conflict isn't good for us, which is why, as I've said, a whole different area would be to work on beliefs and work on values. Anyway, I hope that makes some kind of sense as a follow-up to the other video that I did. Don't see any comments. If they are there, I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing them. So if there are none and no one has anything to ask, I appreciate I've jumped on at an odd time of the day, and I wasn't really expecting anybody to be tuning in. I think there is someone there. Hello, if you're there. But I don't see any comments or questions. So I shall disappear into the ether, and I wish you a very good day if you're watching this live, and also a very good day if you're watching it on the recording, if the recording records, and if you've enjoyed it and stayed this far. Bye for now.